Hello folks, we're back on the Dynaco PAS3X, which you've seen me do some service updates on. Why are we back? Because I don't like how it sounds. This thing does not sound like a hi-fi preamplifier. Sorry to say it, but I'm not one to kid myself. Okay? So, let me try to put into words what I don't like. Now, you will have seen in the last video that I'd never replaced this original electrolytic filter capacitor for the power supply. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I have to change this, but it doesn't sound right. When I'm listening to music that I know, you have music that you know every beat what it's supposed to sound like. I'm listening to all kind of stuff. I'm listening to Nirvana, I'm listening to Bob Marley, I'm listening to, what's the other stuff that put me off? Ozzy Osbourne, AC/DC. Let me try and put it into words. The highs, the treble, upper treble, like the cymbals of the drums kind of thing, sound a bit harsh. Okay, next thing bothered me more is, let's say, the drums, the kick drums, the snare drums, the shot, right, of percussion. When I'm hearing those playing on the stereo, the notes are too soft and sustained, right? Try to picture this. Let's say there's a drum beat. It's not too bassy, it's not too loud, it's not muffled, but it's like the note, I'm hearing the note for longer than I should. The note's a bit sustained. So the bass has this, but it's not even muffled, but it's not tight. It's not accurate. I'm getting a little blur of a note instead of a sharp, defined percussion that I am accustomed to hearing. I know I should be hearing. So anyway, I went online again. I try to keep this thing as stock as possible, but as I say, this is not sounding like a hi-fi preamp. Let's get real and let's move on. So what I think I have to change, I'm going to go ahead and change this, and in doing so, I'm going to uprate the values a bit. This one has values of 3, 30, 20, 20, 10 in the different sections, and this one I've bought is 40, 40, 30, 30, and it just about fits. Does it even fit in here? Just will fit in here, okay? So that would be the power supply. Next thing, I read online that some of these film capacitors should be changed. Not necessarily all. There are some that are definitely in the signal path, and there are some only in the signal path when the tone controls and some of these filters are engaged. So there's certain ones that are definitely in the circuit path, and there may be an audible benefit to upgrading them or replacing them, just generally replacing them. So I've bought a few film type caps, all polypropylenes. I'm just pulling them out of a box here. I have them all over the place. Yeah, so I have various capacitors here. They're all, I think, IC brand polypropylenes and Solon brand polypropylenes. Solon from France. Now, I did bad talk Solons in another video regarding this EAR phono preamp. I'm going to be revisiting this because I realized there was a capacitor I was using. Here it is. This is the culprit here. And I used these with the Solons and I got a bad result. These are audiofilers. Audiofiler. And when I had these in series with the Solons, I got a horrible sound and I didn't like it, and I put back the stock original kit caps. But when I replaced these electrolytics here with these same red film caps, it made this sound terrible, or at least noticeably a bit worse. So I realized that I've got to purge these out. So I'm going to be putting Solons and or ICs in spots that need replacing here. They don't need replacing, but I will see how they benefit me. And I'll be going back to Solens in that and experimenting with that. But that's a separate video. In here in the phono section, I found that some bright treble caps were off. The 68 picofarad ones, wherever they are, they're somewhere around here. So I bought some silver micas to replace those. And that's all I really planned to do the phono. I didn't like how the phono sounds. In this one, I found that the phono section sounds thin and a bit low volume. Now, I'm comparing that to the CD player coming in, which is always going to be louder. So it's going to outshine the phono section just by its sheer volume. But when I put my record player into this EAR and put that into the line section here, that sounded much louder and much fuller, richer, a lot more low end than going straight into the phono here. So this phono section I'm not happy with it. So I may try again some of these capacitors in a few critical spots here to see if things improve a little bit, right? So again, not happy with the stock minimum upgrades stuff. In the last video, the main thing I did was rebuild the DC heater. That's really pretty much most of what I did. So I'm going to go ahead, change the electrolytics, then moved on to the key signal caps and see how that sounds. And then not many, it's only 4 of these and 2 of these. Okay, so I flipped it over, I've looked at this capacitor and the markings on it. Again, it looks okay, and when I test on my meter, I get some capacitance that looks correct, but it doesn't sound right. Anyway, I finally printed out the schematic, and over in this section here, you see a list, and I just looked through everything to see what the values were. So square, rectangle, blank, and semicircle, right? And I looked and figured out what this wiring was in relation to this, and I've listed the values there. So it first goes off the rectifier to 20 microfarad. Voltage gets dropped 20 microfarad again. Then it splits between the upper part here, 47K, goes to the phono preamp and is filtered with a 30 microfarad section, which is the highest of all. And then when it goes through this 10K again to be sent to the line section, PC5, it gets filtered with a 10 microfarad, which is the lowest value of all. Now, I'm really using this more than anything else, so I want this to be the highest. This I'm not too interested in that at all, to be honest. So what I'm going to do with this one here, I'm going to set it up so that 30, 30, 40, 40, I'm going to set it up like this. 30, 30, 40, 40. I think increasing the capacitance here will help with the criticism of sound that I mentioned earlier, where I'm getting a very soft, almost out of control bass, no real definition in the lows, right? So this needs to be bigger, I think. And having this as a 30 means it's still not too high for a tube rectifier. If you put this up to about 100 or anywhere over 50, it stresses out the tube rectifier upon startup. These you could put high. Now, some of those aftermarket capacitor boards, which I have not used in favor of using one of these, those would have these probably all at 47, right? But you know, I could have gotten one of those and done this and replace this all in one board would have done the job of both. But you know, I didn't go that way, and now I'm kind of paying for it. But anyway, at least it still look original anyway. So I think 30, 30, 40, 40 is a way to set up this capacitor on being replaced. Right, so looking at the circuit now, the other capacitors that I mentioned before, which are candidates for replacement, basically just to try and get the best quality of sound without modifying, is these here, right, coming off the plate of the second stage, and this one coming off the plate of the first stage. 0.02 and 0.22, so this is 10 times the size of this. And why just those two? No, that's these and these big ones here, right? Basically the biggest ones here and these green ones. Why just those two? Well, again, I'm trying to keep the thing mostly original. The situation is that all of the other capacitors, one here, one there, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all of these, another one here, are involved with the tone controls or the different filters. This one being the high filter switch, FS filter switch, and the loudness switch. That's here. Now I actually already disabled this. Disabling this was a big improvement. When I had this in place, one channel was louder than the other at various volume settings, which I showed in the first video. So just disconnecting these, which are just kind of hanging here. They're just hanging loose here for now. Made the volume control much nicer to work with, okay? And I don't need that loudness control. And I really don't use this either, to be honest. That filter switch sounds terrible. Right, so the only ones that are actually in the signal path are those two. Because after that, well, there's one more to mention. It goes here. It goes straight out through this 1 microfarad capacitor, which are these electrolytics here, going across here. Now, in the first vid, I showed that the two original electrolytics that were there were old and mismatched. They were two different colors. So I had replaced those with these. And I think it messed up the sound. This actually didn't sound as good as just putting in new electrolytics. Because these are the correct values, 1 microfarad electrolytic. So these are correct. And these sounded better than this. So this has screwed up that part of the effort. These junky capacitors. I'm sure that maybe they sound good in guitar, so they're not sound good in hi-fi. Those messed up my EAR phono project as well. So again, I'm going to go back on that. Right, so really just these 3 per channel are pretty much the whole signal path if you're not using those tone controls, okay? Different story if I get into all that, right? Okay, so phono now. This is the phono section, which I don't like how it sounds. I bought capacitors for here, and these were out of spec. So I bought replacements for that. That's about it. I really didn't feel to dig up too much into the phono. I don't really like it, and I'm not trying to make it sound great because I already have the EAR unit, which sounds fantastic. So I'm just content to change these and see what happens. So the biggest headache in this operation is just getting the damn resistors and leads unsoldered off of these 4 terminals, especially the ground lugs, because the ground lugs have extra solder that blobs and attaches them to the chassis, and they're pretty hard to dislodge all this solder because the amount of heat required. So anyway, I still have to work a bit more on one ground lug there, and I will have everything detached and do this swap of the new one. Right, so I got this out finally. And let's just take a quick look. Cornell Double, if this would focus. Cornell Double 6621. That's the bottom digits I see there. 4 digits, 6621. Is that a date code of 1966? It may be. I have every reason to believe this is original. And all the other date codes on the parts are 66. So this visually has lasted. But I'll put it a very simple little cap meter in this, I will test it, but you know, very much into replacing it. And you know what, folks, it damn measures correct on every section here. Every section here gives the correct reading or higher. It should be 20. Right, so out with the old, in with the new. Now you can see we just took out a 1966 part, and here's the brand new one from CE Manufacturing. Putting it so the 30 is closer. Putting it so. Right. So this is the new one. It just fits absolutely perfect. And I've oriented it to put the sections in the way that I mentioned earlier. So all I have to do is take up pliers and twist those ground lugs that are coming through, and that will hold it in place. Right, so I gave each of those a twist, not too much, not too much. You don't want to go halfway around, you don't want to go 90 degrees, just a little twist and it's going to hold it in place. When I shake it, it's quite firm. So I put a drop of solder on one or two of them, hook up all the ground wires, and then put back those resistors and the relevant connections. They're all over here actually. Now I had a problem before where all the voltages in this whole amp were a bit on the low side, and these resistors, these 10k resistors, are reading a bit too high. They're reading almost 12k and it should be 10. So I'm going to be replacing these with these 10k carbon films, and I think that's the right thing to do because the whole system had low voltage. Okay, so quick review. We have gone in off the rectifier into the 30 microfarad, then through a 10k to another 30 microfarad section, and we've branched off 47k to a 40 microfarad section, and that feeds the phono on that blue line there. And you also branched off a 10k and go to PC5, which is the line section here. So that's it. The eagle eye among you would have noticed that I put some diodes here, because I did try diodes instead of the tube rectifier for two reasons. When I found the bass was sounding floppy and loose, I changed to solid state rectifier, which is supposed to tighten things up, but it also corrected the low voltages I was complaining about before, where everything was about 10%, less than 10%, but like these would have been like 390 something, 330 something. They were all low. So these have from now corrected those voltages, but we'll see. I may take these out and put the tube rectifier back in place. So I've stuffed in all the capacitors that I have intended to change. 22s, 0.22s, these black ones, 0.02 those, 0.1s, 0.05s. I'm feeling kind of dumb, and some silver micers too. Feeling kind of dumb. Why didn't I order all in the same brand? It may be that the brand I was choosing didn't have all the values in it. I can't quite figure it out, but I really did think I was ordering all the same. But I've seen these yellow ones in most pictures of these cap upgrades online. Right, so I get to solder everything. I've just poked them through, and you can see all the long leads hanging down there. Let me go ahead and solder that up, and I will be done. Alright folks, we're getting there, or we've gotten there. Okay, I brought the PAS into this big old school stereo setup I showed you in the first vid. Got a Technics SL23, Sony cassette player, Harman Kardon CD player, Acoustic Energy AE1s, and some subs below. And I'm listening to the song. It's a local song, and I know how this bass drum is supposed to sound and how this snare on the drums will sound. I know this song so well, and this is one of the ones I had in mind when I was saying I'm listening to it, and it's just sounding soft in the bass and there's no definition in the lows. This now sounds how it's supposed to sound. Okay, I'm pretty happy with this. When changing selections here, there's 3 of them on at the same time now, but you can hear other inputs showing up in the one you're listening to. They do crosstalk with each other. Now the solution to that may be to change all of these original wires over to shielded wires, individual shielded runs, from the inputs to wherever they go in the switching system. But I'm not going to dig up in all that. It's tempting to do it, but again, I'm trying to keep this original, and all I've done is replace capacitors, rebuild that supply, and it's sounding pretty damn good. So the bass is tightened right up. The highs sound good. So I think that my little exercise of changing those signal caps, those two yellow ones there, and these other black ones there, have done the job. But you know what? The majority of it was probably done by replacing this capacitor, because the filter sections on this are higher than before. Particularly the filter section for the power supply for this board. It was 10 microfarads before, and I am no engineer, but to me that sounds low. I have never really seen anything except for a very old 50s guitar amp have such low filtering.
So I'm telling you, chosen, oh, sing along, well.
And now I've gone from 10 microfarads to 40. It's really tightened up the sound. It's a local production called Buzz Rock. Universal Blacks, that's the album. Okay, so I'm happy with this. This is good enough. I'm going to chill out with this for a couple of weeks. Listen to it. Hopefully, the way it's sounding right now, I don't think I'm going to be twisting up my face and digging up into the circuit. I think I'm happy with this. So is the Dynaco PAS giving me hi-fi performance? I'll have to say now, yes it is. So yes, folks, my final wrap-up. I just listened to a few things. The Who's Quadrophenia on record, and Ozzy's Diary of a Madman on CD, James Taylor on record. Bunch of stuff that I just know how every note is supposed to sound, and I'm very happy with this. So my ultimate conclusion is, when you're servicing these, have to do those filters in addition to those rectifiers. Just because the can is looking good and measures okay on a basic test doesn't mean it's going to work fine, right? So get those boards. You know that all-in-one board I mentioned that has the power filter caps and the heater supply rebuild? Go ahead and get that. Don't take the long way that I did. Okay, because ultimately that's all you really need to do. Yes, I changed these caps, signal caps, but ultimately I think this is the main thing. Cool, so I'm gonna enjoy. It sounds great now.